Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kwadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into Ezekiel, the 25th chapter. And basically in this chapter, it's pretty much the Lord having Ezekiel prophesy against the neighboring nations of Israel, concerning how the Lord is going to bring judgment upon them, because of their rejoicing, or partaking in the destruction of Israel and Jerusalem, or more so Judah, when the Babylonians came and destroyed it. Okay. And as we read this, the judgments that are mentioned in here, really the Lord brought this over a period of time, right? It wasn't just like immediately, right away, this is what happened. Okay, but you'll notice that today, when you actually look at the land of Israel, right? If we pull up land of Israel. Okay. Let's see. Modern. Try to get maybe a right. So if we look at, we can see something like this, right? This is like the modern area of the land of Israel. Now, today, the actual nations that were really in that region, when you read in the biblical times, they're not actually there right now, most of them. Okay. But in period of time, you had like the Moabites, right? You had the Ammonites, obviously the Israelites, and so on and so forth within this region. Okay, even the Philistines and all of that. But in period of time, that that's not the case right now when you look at that region. So let's start off with the book of Ezekiel chapter 25, verse 1. The word of the Lord Yahweh came again unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against the Ammonites and prophesy against them. Now we believe through faith that the Ammonites, the biblical Ammonites today are the modern day Japanese. All right. And when that's something that if you go and look through, you try to read through all different kinds of secular history and this, that, and that, there's not enough records to tie in, give you that tangible evidence to say, here's where the Ammonites actually went and ended up over here. Okay, but we believe it through faith. Just like there are a lot of aspects in the Bible that you cannot, especially in today's day and age, you cannot prove substantially with tangible secular history. Okay, but we believe them through faith. All right, because when you actually look up about the Ammonites, there's a missing link, tying the actual biblical Ammonites to the so-called Japanese today in secular history, right? They'll just tell you that after the Babylonians conquered them, some period of time after that, they quote unquote like sort of disappeared, in history. They got like assimilated into other nations and end of story. But we know that that's not the case, right? Because when you read other precepts, it talks about how in the latter days the Lord is going to bring back the captivity of Ammon, or how there is no end to all the nations. Because guess what? In the kingdom, they're going to be Ammonites, right? Moabites and all of them. So that means they're still here today. They still exist today. All right. But it's just that a lot of these nations, they all come from, one of these patriarchs going back to the 18 different nations, right? The Moabites, the Ammonites, Edomites, and so on and so forth. But just like today, if the Lord hadn't put the spirit upon, us, the Israelites, really the prophets, that connection of tying in who are the modern day X, who are the modern day Y, people wouldn't have that, right? The Lord put the spirit on the prophets to be able to come and reveal, hey, the modern day Edomites are actually X, Y, and Z. The modern day Moabites are X, Y, and Z. The modern day Ammonites are X, Y, and Z. The modern day Israelites are X, Y, and Z. Because for a period of time, that knowledge, was not widely known. Chances are that the elites who have actual access to a lot of historical documents and so on and so forth that they keep concealed, they know. But they're not going to reveal that or release that to the public. Nevertheless, as the Lord is telling Ezekiel here, prophesy, set your face against the Ammonites and prophesy against them. Speak these words that I'm going to put into your mouth against the Ammonites as something that's going to happen to them. Now, the Ammonites were neighbors of us, right? They were on the east of the territory of Gad, right? If we look up, let's see. Yeah, here they have it spelled as Ammon. Typically, you'll see it as Ammon or Ammon. Okay, but I'm trying to see if they have it with all the different nations. But nevertheless, you can see the different regions over here. Okay, you have Ammon on the east. You have Gad and Reuben and the half tribe of Manasseh. But you had like Moab and Ammon, which were on the east side of our borders. And then you had Edom, which was more south, along with Ishmael, which was also south. And then you had the Philistines and so on and so forth that were more on our west, around the coast area. Okay, and then of course you also had the Syrians, Arameans that were north as well, and so on and so forth. So verse 3 says, "And say unto the Ammonites, hear the word of the Lord Yahweh. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because thou saidest, Aha, against my sanctuary, when it was profaned, and against the land of Israel, when it was desolate, and against the house of Judah, when they went into captivity." So when the Babylonians came, because the Babylonians ultimately, they did come and attack the Ammonites. Remember, in about a chapter or two ago, it might have been the previous chapter, it talked about here, there we go, the Lord basically revealed to Ezekiel that to have him draw two paths, because in actuality, the Nebuchadnezzar was contemplating who should he attack first, right? Jerusalem or the Ammonites. He ended up going with Jerusalem, but eventually they still came against the Ammonites. Okay, so I think it might have been, this was in right, even this day set himself, or it might have been the chapter before this one. Yeah, anyway, I believe it was in the 24th chapter. You can watch the video on that, but basically that's in there. So the Babylonians actually came against the Ammonites. They also destroyed, messed them up, put them in captivity, subjected them onto them as well. Okay, but we just got it first. So the Lord is saying when the Israelites, right, when the temple was destroyed, the walls were broken down, and Israel was made desolate, you rejoiced. You said, Aha. So because of that, right, verse 4, behold, therefore I will deliver thee to the men of the east for a possession, and they shall set their palaces in thee, and make their dwellings in thee. They shall eat thy fruit, and they shall drink thy milk. Now here, when it's talking about the thee, it's talking about the land. Okay, and the men of the east here, when you look in history, because this didn't happen immediately, over a period of time, right? After the Babylonians came and took over or subjected the Ammonites and did some damage to them. Some period after that, you'll notice that in history you have now the Nabateans. Okay, when you look them up, which they were Ishmaelites, they actually came and for a period of time they were dwelling in that region. Right? When you look up like the Nabatean kingdom, a part of the region that they dwelt in was that region where Moab used to be, Ammon used to be, and even where Edom used to be. That's why sometimes they'll try to say that the Edomites are Ishmaelites, because the Nabateans were dwelling in that land of like Petra and all of that, which was known to be a territory of Edom. But in actuality, these nations were driven out at some point in history. It's not exactly clear what exact time it was that they were moved from their lands, but they were driven out. And then you had the Ishmaelites come up in there and take over. That's why you have a lot of Ishmaelites in that region today. Okay, but these nations were driven out at some point. That's why you don't see the modern day Chinese and Japanese in that land. Okay. So it says here, so I will deliver thee to the men of the east for a possession, and they shall set their palaces in thee and make their dwellings in thee meaning in the land. So eventually they came and they took over and they were dwelling in those regions, right? And they shall eat thy fruit and they shall drink thy milk. Now, when you look up the Nabateans, right, i.e. like the kingdom, the Nabatean kingdom, it says that they basically came up around like the 4th to 2nd century BC, which is around like 300s to about 100 or so BC, and that's right around the time of like the Greeks ruling and so on and so forth. So something to also keep in mind is, although you may have certain precepts or accounts that talk about the Ammonites, it will refer to like Ammon and so on and so forth. There's also there are also instances where when it refers to Ammon or Ammonites, it's talking about just the people that were dwelling in that region. Okay. So it could be that you had, of course, other nations that were in there, but because they were dwelling in that region of Ammon, it was just referred to as Ammon, right? The people of Ammon, they were dwelling in that land. All right, because we know that after a period of time, the actual Ammonites and Moabites, they moved. They were pushed out from that land, from that actual region in the Levant. Okay. So it says here, and I will make Rabbah a stable for camels, and the Ammonites a couching place for flocks, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. And typically, the Ishmaelites are known for that, for their camels and flocks and so on and so forth. But I had pulled up Nabateans. I wanted to read a certain portion in here. All right, so it says here, this is the main part that I wanted to read. So it says, many Nabateans were forcefully converted to Judaism by Hasmonean king Alexander Jannaeus. It was this king who, after putting down a local rebellion, invaded and occupied the Nabatean towns of Moab and Gilead and imposed a tribute of an unknown amount. So now, why is it referred to as the Nabatean towns of Moab and Gilead? Around that region is also where Ammon was. So what were the Nabateans doing there for it to be referred to as their towns? Right? Why, when Alexander Jannaeus went in there, why didn't he find the actual Moabites in there? Okay, because they weren't there at that time. And just as the Lord said, he was going to make their habitation basically to be taken over by these men. All right, and mainly these men of the east being the Ishmaelites. Okay, so it says here, and I will make Rabbah, which Rabbah I believe is a location, one of the Ammonite cities or so. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, it says the capital city of the Ammonites located east of the Jordan. So continuing, it says here, and I will make Rabbah a stable for camels, and the Ammonites a couching place for flocks. And ye shall know that I am the Lord. For thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because thou hast clapped thine hands, and stamped with thy feet, and rejoiced in heart with all thy despite against the land of Israel. So all their contempt and hate that they had against us, they rejoiced when we went into captivity. The Lord is saying, therefore, behold, therefore, I will stretch out mine hand upon thee, and will deliver thee for a spoil to the heathen. And I will cut thee off from the people, and I will cause thee to perish out of the countries. And I will destroy thee, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord Yahweh. Now, when you look up, like I mentioned, about the Ammonites, it tells you, right, that they also went into captivity. Now it says, okay, just going to read this main part in here. You can you can look it up and get as much information as you want on your leisure. But it says here, newer evidence suggests that Ammon enjoyed continuity from the Neo-Babylonian to the Persian period of 550 to 330 BC. One reason includes Ammon becoming a Babylonian province shortly after being devastated by Nebuchadnezzar II in the 580s BC. So right around 587, 586 is when Jerusalem was taken down besieged and broken down by the Babylonians. And then not too long after that, you had the Ammonites that also got their work. I think that might have been somewhere around like maybe 580, 82 or so, but somewhere in the 580s. Okay, so as the Lord says here, right, that I would stretch out my hand upon you, you also gonna get that work. And I will deliver thee for a spoil to the heathen. So they also became subject, which at this time it was to Babylon. And I will cut thee off from the people, and I will cause thee to perish out of the countries. So ultimately, right, when you actually look up this word perish, we know the Lord is not saying here that the Ammonites are going to go extinct, because the scriptures tell you that, let me see, of the people. Oh, wow. Let's see if I can find this precept. Here we go. Beautiful. This is Ecclesiastes 4:16. It says here, there is no end of all the people, even of all that have been before them. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and vexation of spirit. So technically, the 18 nations the Lord has created, until the Lord changes and says otherwise, they're always going to be here. Okay, you can't like necessarily destroy them. What's going to happen, of course, in the kingdom pertaining to Obadiah, the 1st chapter, is the Lord is going to do away with the Edomites. But aside from that, which is explicitly stated in scripture, all the nations from, the 18 nations that are listed in the scriptures, they're still here today. They may not be called by their biblical names, but they're still here today. They may look slightly different than their original phenotypes, but they're still here today. So when you go back to Ezekiel 25, when the Lord says he's going to cause Ammon to perish out of the countries, when you look at that word perish, you have ibad, but one of the definitions you have here, it says to go astray, to vanish, to be lost. I think there was one more in here. Yeah, it says to blot out, do away with, cause to vanish. Okay, which ultimately, like I described in the beginning, what ended up happening to the native Ammonites, right, which we believe to be the modern day Japanese. What ended up happening to them is eventually, in period of time, they were basically removed or blotted out from that Levant area. And that's why they're all the way on the east. Okay, all the way on the east side of pretty much of the world, if you look at it, with Israel being at the middle. And they're nowhere to be found in the Levant area. Okay, which is those countries, the countries being that area in that Levant region where you had, in ancient times, you had Israel, Moab, Ammon, Judah, which is part of Israel, Ishmael and all of that. But Ammon was removed from there, right? It says, I will destroy thee and thou shalt know that I am the Lord. So ultimately they got subjected into captivity. And then after a period of time, whenever exactly that was, they were moved out of there. So it says here Moab, and like I said, this happened over a period of time. This wasn't like something that just happened immediately. Verse 8. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because that Moab and Seir do say, behold, the house of Judah is like unto all the heathen. Therefore, because when they said that, it was a saying of contempt, of them, in a rejoiceful state, but also basically like, look at these people, like they're what happened to them being the so-called special people of God? Now look at them, sort of in that kind of way. So the Lord says, because you speak in that way, you talking down, you rejoicing and mocking. Therefore, behold, I will open the side of Moab from the cities, from his cities which are on his frontiers, meaning his borders. So pretty much the Lord said, I'm going to make a breach in your border. All right. The glory of the country, Beth Jeshimoth, Baal Meon, and Kiriathaim, onto the men of the east with the Ammonites. So same way the land of the Ammonites was opened up onto the men of the east, the Ishmaelites, which came up and took over that, I'm going to also give your territory onto them. Right? It says, and will give them in possession. that the Ammonites may not be remembered among the nations. Now, like I said, interestingly enough, if you go and try to look up history on the Ammonites, you're going to hit a stopping point. You're either going to find out that they'll say that, oh, they existed up until somewhere around the Roman time period, and then that's it. There's not really any history on them anymore. Or you're going to find sources that tell you that, oh, they existed up until after being made captive, to the Babylonians, and then they sort of just disappeared from history. Okay, as the Ammonites. So as it says here, the Lord said concerning Moab that their land was also going to be given as a possession to the men of the east. And when we read about the regions that the Nabateans, which are Ishmaelites, right? Let's actually go back to the tab of the Nabateans. And if we go to the biblical section here, you'll see it says, the Nabateans appear in the Hebrew Bible as a tribe descended from Nebayot, the first son of Ishmael, himself the son of Abraham and Hagar. It's talking about Ishmael, okay, when it says that. Ishmael, the first son of Abraham. So these Nabateans are Ishmaelites, okay? And so that's what the Lord is saying. I'm also going to give your land just like I gave the land of the Ammonites to them. And when you read in history, in period of time, they were the ones who eventually came up to occupy that region. It says here, verse 11, and I will execute judgments upon Moab, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh. Verse 12, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because that Edom hath dealt against the house of Judah by taking vengeance, and hath greatly offended, and revenged himself upon them. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, I will also stretch out my hand upon Edom. Now, when you actually look up, let's go to the Apocrypha real quick, because guess what? The Edomites, they also had a hand to play, or a role to play in our captivity. No, it should be There we go. This is First Ezra chapter 4, verse 43. Then said he unto the king, and I believe this is Zerubbabel speaking to Darius after he had basically won the contest for the wisest saying. And Darius said, I'll grant you whatever you want. So he was basically requesting that we be able to go back and finish building the temple. And he was saying, well, Cyrus, your predecessor allowed us to do it, but we were stopped. So I'm requesting permission from you to go back. So in that request, he says here, then said he unto the king, remember thy vow which thou hast vowed to build Jerusalem in the day when thou camest to thy kingdom, and to send away all the vessels that were taken away out of Jerusalem, which Cyrus set apart, when he vowed to destroy Babylon, and to send them again thither. Thou also hast vowed to build up the temple, which the Edomites burned, when Judea was made desolate by the Chaldees. See? So them Edomites, they came up in there, and guess what? When we were taken captive, they came up and started taking our cities. So they definitely had a role, and they definitely played a role in this. And the Lord is saying, because of that, right? And have, like it says here, and thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because that Edom hath dealt against the house of Judah by taking vengeance, and hath greatly offended, and revenged himself upon them. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because we know that even from the womb, right, there's been that contention and that hatred. But also keep in mind that when we were in rulership, we did put them in captivity under us. We were on King David and Joab. They were getting down on the Edomites. They remembered that. Okay, they definitely remember that. So it wasn't even in the time when we were trying to get passage through their land. They were enemies with us. During the time of King Saul, when the Lord commanded Saul to go and slay all them Amalekites, guess what? They remembered all of that. Look at how Amalek is behaving today. Look at how they're behaving today. So what do you think with that spirit they got? It's the same spirit they had back then. So all of those things they also kept in mind. And when they saw this opportunity, this golden opportunity, they took it. But the Lord is saying, well, because you did, verse 13, therefore thus saith the Lord Yahweh, I will also stretch out mine hand upon Edom, and will cut off man and beast from it, and I will make it desolate from Teman, and they of Dedan shall fall by the sword. And I will lay my vengeance upon Edom by the hand of my people Israel. And they shall do in Edom according to mine anger, and according to my fury, and they shall know my vengeance, saith the Lord Yahweh. Now, we know that this is a prophetic, ultimately a prophetic judgment that will come upon Edom, because the Lord said that he was going to lay his vengeance upon Edom by the hand of his people Israel. Now, in the time of, from the time of Ezekiel, yes, the Edomites eventually, they also got driven, up and then into the mountains area, and then eventually they came back down and, started imposing themselves as other nations, right? All of a sudden, the original Romans became Edomites. How did that happen, right? So, and then also eventually, right, in history, they went through some judgments, but there was no actual, full time period or account where we as Israelites had laid that vengeance upon them, that basically laid the Lord's anger upon them through us. That hasn't happened yet. Okay, but it will very soon. So as this society is going down, when the Lord comes back, number one, he's going to start by laying this place desolate, i.e. Babylon. And then, as it says in Revelation, the 18th chapter, the cup that she hath filled, she's gonna drink double of that. Okay, the scriptures, the Lord also said, I believe it's in the book of Jeremiah, that all they that whose captives we were, they're gonna be our captives. Okay. So verse 14, it says, and I will, oh, actually just read that. Verse 15 it says, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because the Philistines have dealt by revenge, and have taken vengeance with a despiteful heart, to destroy it for the old hatred. So they held on to that contempt, that hatred they had, and they also, did their part in playing their role to come against Israel during this time. So the Lord said, because of that, guess what? Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I will stretch out mine hand upon the Philistines, and I will cut off the cherethims and destroy the remnant of the seacoast. Which, when you look up the cherethims, it goes into the Cherethites, right? Which were like a part of their armies or mercenaries and so on and so forth. And it says here, and destroy the remnant of the seacoast, because that's really where the Philistines dwell, right? If we look up land, let me zoom out real quick. Well, let's just put Philistine and Israel map. Okay, so this is during the ancient times, right? And you can see it has the Philistines right here on the west side, which is on the coastal area, because right on the left side of that was the Mediterranean Sea. So the Philistines were typically around the border area right there. Okay, that's why they were referred to as the Lord said he would destroy the remnant of the seacoast. And ultimately, what ended up happening? Like, if you look today, they're not, even though that they used to be there in ancient times, they're not really there today. Majority of them have been driven into Africa. Okay, so really, when you look at a lot of these neighboring nations, even the actual Israelites themselves, all right, are not there today. But when you look at these neighboring nations, they've all been driven out for the most part. Now you have Amalekites in there, okay, because obviously you had Edom that was bordered there. So you had Amalekites in there, Amalekites, Edomites, yada yada. But the Moabites are not there, the Ammonites are not there, the original Philistines are not there, the original Israelites are not there. And I mean, ultimately in the kingdom, that land is really going to be just for Israel, because that's what was promised onto Abraham. And when you actually look at the region that was promised onto Abraham, it's much, much, much bigger than what you'll see when you just pull up a map. So it says, verse 17, and I will execute great vengeance upon them with furious rebukes, and they shall know that I am the Lord Yahweh when I shall lay my vengeance upon them. And that's pretty much it for Ezekiel, the 25th chapter. So Lord willing, you are edified. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.